Some people think a reserved parking sign is a suggestion until the tow truck arrives and the paperwork starts talking louder than their last name. At 7:05 on a Friday morning, Ethan Walker stood outside Walker Precision Repair with a paper cup of coffee cooling in his hand, watching a white Porsche sit crookedly in the one parking spot that legally belonged to his shop. The spot was not hidden, confusing, or shared. It was painted with bright yellow lines, marked with a clean metal sign that read "Reserved for Tenant," and positioned directly in front of the garage bay Ethan used for customer drop-offs, parts deliveries, and moving vehicles in and out before the workday began. Yet there it was again, the same Porsche, the same polished wheels, the same Brookhaven Pines Clubhouse sticker on the windshield, sitting there like the entire morning schedule could wait for Tyler Whitmore to finish his workout. This was not the first time. It was not the third time. It was the 13th morning Ethan had found Tyler's Porsche in his reserved space, and by then every warning had already been given in writing, photographed, time-stamped, and saved. Across the street, Tyler stood near the clubhouse sidewalk in expensive athletic clothes, arms folded, looking more annoyed than worried as a private property towing truck backed carefully toward the Porsche. Beside him was his mother, Brenda Whitmore, the kind of homeowners association board member who did not need a badge to act like she had won. She was dressed in a pale blazer, holding her phone like she was ready to summon authority from the air itself. "Ethan," she called across the lot, "you are going to regret this. That is my son's car." Ethan did not raise his voice. He did not step toward her. He did not touch the Porsche, argue with the tow operator, or give Brenda the dramatic scene she clearly wanted. He only pointed toward the security camera mounted above the garage door and said, "I warned you 12 times. The 13th was paperwork." The tow operator checked the final notice Ethan had provided, matched the license plate to the photos, confirmed the posted signage, and began the standard removal process under the private parking agreement attached to Ethan's lease. Tyler finally walked closer, his confidence starting to thin as the tow operator documented the car's condition from all sides. "You cannot tow a Porsche because of one parking spot," Tyler said. Ethan looked at the reserved sign, then at the garage bay blocked behind it, then back at Tyler. It was never just one parking spot. It was a customer pickup delayed on Monday, a parts truck turned away on Tuesday, a repair schedule pushed back on Wednesday, and 12 separate chances for you to park anywhere else. Brenda stepped in before Tyler could answer, insisting the lot was community adjacent and that Ethan needed to be flexible because Brookhaven Pines residents supported businesses nearby. Ethan almost smiled at that phrase, because Brenda always used community when she meant convenience. The Porsche rose slowly onto the tow bed, perfectly intact, perfectly documented, and suddenly much less untouchable than Tyler had believed. What Brenda and Tyler did not understand yet was that towing was only the first part. Every ignored notice, every unpaid fee, every day they refused to resolve it would add another line to a record they could no longer control. That morning, Ethan did not turn the Porsche into anything. He simply stopped protecting it from the consequences Tyler had parked himself into. 3 weeks earlier, Ethan Walker had not thought of his reserved parking space as something anyone would fight over. Walker Precision Repair sat on a small commercial strip just beyond the back entrance of Brookhaven Pines, close enough for residents to pass on their way to the clubhouse, but legally separate from the neighborhood and clearly marked as private business property. Ethan had leased the building because it gave him exactly what a small repair shop needed: one clean garage bay, a narrow office, a parts room, and a single reserved parking spot directly in front of the roll-up door. That spot was not a luxury. It was the center of his morning routine. Customers used it when dropping off vehicles before work. Parts drivers used it when unloading heavy boxes. Ethan used it to stage cars safely before moving them inside. The parking space was written into his lease, shown on the property map, painted with yellow lines, and marked with a metal sign that said "Reserved for Tenant" in letters large enough to read from the street. For the first year, nobody questioned it. Most Brookhaven Pines residents treated the shop with casual respect. They waved when walking dogs, dropped off lawn equipment for small repairs, and sometimes asked Ethan to look at a strange engine noise before they drove to the dealership. He liked that kind of neighborly relationship. He had no interest in picking fights with a community board or turning a parking space into a legal folder. Then Tyler Whitmore started using the spot. The first morning it happened, Ethan arrived at 6:40 and found the white Porsche sitting in front of his bay, shining under the early sun like it belonged in a car magazine instead of blocking a mechanic's workday. He checked the windshield for a note, but there was only a Brookhaven Pines clubhouse sticker and a gym bag on the passenger seat. Ethan waited 10 minutes, assuming someone had made a mistake. At 6:55, Tyler came walking from the clubhouse path, towel around his neck, earbuds in, looking completely unbothered. Ethan pointed to the sign and told him the spot was reserved for the shop. Tyler pulled out one earbud, glanced at the sign, and said he was only there for a quick workout. Ethan explained that quick did not matter when the garage bay was blocked. Tyler gave a small smile, the kind people use when they are not really listening, and said his mother was on the Homeowners Association board and nobody had ever complained before. Ethan almost corrected every part of that sentence, but instead he kept it simple. This is private tenant parking. Please do not use it again. Tyler drove away a minute later, and Ethan thought that would be the end of it. The next morning, the Porsche was back. Same angle, same clubhouse sticker, same confidence. Ethan took a photograph this time, showing the car, the sign, the yellow lines, and the blocked garage door. He placed a polite note under the windshield wiper. This space is reserved for Walker Precision Repair. Please do not park here again. By the time Tyler returned, a customer was already waiting behind Ethan's truck with an appointment that should have started 15 minutes earlier. Tyler pulled the note from the windshield, read it, folded it once, and slipped it into his pocket without apologizing. That was when Ethan understood the problem was not confusion. It was permission Tyler had given himself. By the end of that first week, Ethan Walker had learned that Tyler Whitmore did not see the reserved space as a boundary. He saw it as a convenience that happened to belong to someone else. Every morning between 6:25 and 6:45, the white Porsche rolled in from the rear entrance road, turned past the small tenant parking sign, and settled in front of Ethan's garage bay like part of a routine. Tyler would step out in spotless athletic clothes, check his phone, and walk toward the Brookhaven Pines clubhouse gym without looking back. The pattern was so consistent that Ethan's security camera almost made it look scheduled. On Monday, it delayed a customer drop-off. On Tuesday, it forced a parts driver to unload 2 heavy boxes from the curb. On Wednesday, Ethan had to park a customer's truck along the side road while he waited for Tyler to return. Each time, Ethan documented the problem, not because he wanted drama, but because he had run a small business long enough to know that repeated disrespect only became clear to outsiders when it had dates, times, and photographs. After the 4th morning, Ethan sent a polite email to Brenda Whitmore, Tyler's mother and a well-known Homeowners Association board member at Brookhaven Pines. He attached one photo of the Porsche in the reserved space, one photo of the sign, and one copy of the parking section from his lease. He wrote that the space was private tenant parking for Walker Precision Repair, that it was necessary for business operations, and that Tyler needed to stop using it. Brenda replied that afternoon with the kind of language Ethan had heard before from people who wanted their inconvenience to sound like community policy. She wrote that Brookhaven Pines had always maintained a cooperative relationship with nearby businesses and that Ethan should show reasonable flexibility for residents using shared community amenities. Ethan stared at the word shared for a long moment. There was nothing shared about his lease, his garage bay, or the rent he paid every month. He answered with one sentence. This parking space is not a community amenity. The next morning, the Porsche was back. This time, Tyler left it even closer to the garage door, close enough that Ethan had to squeeze between the bumper and the bay entrance to unlock the shop. A yellow sticky note was placed on the dashboard, facing outward, with 3 words written in black marker, "Talk to Mom." Ethan took a photograph of that too. He did not confront Tyler at the clubhouse. He did not call Brenda names. He did not block the Porsche or do anything that could turn the story against him. He simply started a folder labeled Whitmore Parking Record and saved every clip in order. By the 9th morning, the folder included photos, time-stamped video, emails, delivery delays, customer schedule changes, and proof that Tyler had been warned more than once. What made the situation worse was Brenda's confidence. She was not just protecting her son. She was teaching him that other people's property became negotiable when the Whitmore name was involved. Ethan knew that lesson would eventually become expensive. He just did not know yet how determined they were to keep ignoring the signs. Ethan Walker waited until the problem affected more than his patience before he sent the final notice. That happened on the 10th morning, when a delivery truck carrying a rebuilt transmission had to circle the block twice because Tyler Whitmore's Porsche was sitting in the reserved space again, directly in front of the garage bay. The driver called from the street, annoyed but professional, and told Ethan he could not safely unload from the curb without blocking traffic. Ethan looked at the Porsche, looked at the empty clubhouse parking lot only 50 yards away, and felt the last bit of neighborly patience leave him. He had a customer waiting on that transmission. He had a base schedule built around that delivery. He had already given Tyler polite words, written notes, photos, emails, and more chances than most people would have offered. So Ethan did what he always did when a situation needed to become official. He printed the lease page showing the reserved space assigned to Walker Precision Repair. He printed the property map with the tenant parking area marked. He printed the photographs of the Porsche blocking the bay on multiple mornings. Then he called the property management company for the commercial strip, explained the repeated unauthorized parking, and asked for the private property towing procedure in writing. The manager, a woman named Dana Miller, sounded tired before Ethan even finished the story. She told him Brookhaven Pines residents had been warned before not to use tenant spaces near the commercial strip, but certain people acted as if the rules became flexible when parking near the clubhouse was more convenient. Dana emailed Ethan the towing authorization form, the private parking agreement, and the number for a licensed towing company contracted for the property. She also confirmed that the sign was visible, the space was assigned, and after written warning, Ethan had the right to request removal of an unauthorized vehicle blocking business access. Ethan saved her email in the Whitmore parking record. Then he wrote one final message to Brenda Whitmore, copying Dana and the management company. He kept it short, clear, and impossible to twist. Your son's vehicle has repeatedly occupied the reserved tenant parking space assigned to Walker Precision Repair after multiple warnings. The space is necessary for customer drop-offs, parts deliveries, and garage access. If the Porsche is parked there again, it will be removed by the authorized private property towing company at the owner's expense. Brenda replied less than 20 minutes later. Her message said Ethan was escalating a minor parking inconvenience, that Tyler was a young man with a busy schedule, and that a business owner near Brookhaven Pines should not create hostility over a few morning visits. Ethan read it once, then saved it without answering. The next morning, the Porsche did not appear. For one brief day, the reserved space sat empty, quiet, and available exactly the way it was supposed to be. Ethan moved 3 customer vehicles in and out before noon without a single delay. It felt almost normal. But on Thursday morning, the Porsche returned. This time Tyler parked even more confidently, centered between the yellow lines, with the same small note visible on the dashboard, "Talk to Mom." Ethan stood in the shop doorway for several seconds, not surprised, not angry, just certain. He took one wide photograph showing the Porsche, the reserved sign, the block garage bay, and the timestamp from the camera feed. Then he opened the final notice email on his phone, forwarded it to Dana with the current photo attached, and saved the new clip into the record. Tyler had not misunderstood the warning. Brenda had not misunderstood the consequence. They had simply decided that Ethan would not follow through. That was the mistake that turned the whole situation from a neighborhood annoyance into a documented business enforcement issue. Ethan did not call the towing company right away, because he wanted every step to be clean enough that even Brenda Whitmore could not bury it under attitude. He unlocked the shop, turned on the office lights, and opened the security system on his desktop computer. The driveway camera showed Tyler arriving at 6:31 in the morning. The front camera showed the Porsche turning past the tenant parking sign. The bay camera showed the car stopping directly in front of the roll-up door. The timestamp was clear, the sign was visible, and the yellow lines framed the vehicle like a picture made for a hearing room. Ethan exported each clip, named the files by date and camera location, and added them to the Whitmore parking record. Then he printed the final notice he had sent the day before and placed it beside the lease page, the property map, Dana Miller's towing authorization email, and the photographs from that morning. By 6:58, a customer named Mr. Alvarez pulled up in a silver pickup truck for a scheduled brake inspection and had nowhere to stop. Ethan met him at the curb, apologized, and guided him to a temporary space behind the parts room. Mr. Alvarez looked at the Porsche, and said he had seen that same car there before. Ethan did not invite gossip. He only said the matter was being handled through the proper property procedure. At 7:04, Ethan called the licensed towing company listed in Dana's email. He gave the dispatcher the property address, the space number, the license plate, the vehicle description, and explained that the vehicle was blocking a reserved tenant space after written notice. The dispatcher asked if signage was posted and visible. Ethan said yes. She asked if he had authorization from property management. Ethan said yes, and forwarded the email while they were still on the phone. She told him a driver would come to document the vehicle and verify the signs before removal. Ethan thanked her, hung up, and sent Dana one more email with the current photo attached. The Porsche is parked in the reserved space again after final notice. I have requested authorized private property towing under the written procedure. He received a reply 2 minutes later. Document everything. Do not engage directly if they become argumentative. Ethan took that advice seriously. When Tyler returned from the clubhouse path 20 minutes later, he saw Ethan standing inside the office, not outside waiting for a confrontation. Tyler tapped on the glass door and pointed at the Porsche like Ethan was supposed to hurry. Ethan opened the door only halfway and said the vehicle had been reported for removal under the notice sent yesterday. Tyler laughed once, but it sounded forced. You are not actually doing that, he said. Ethan pointed to the printed final notice on the counter. I already did. Tyler's expression changed from amused to irritated. He pulled out his phone and said his mother was going to fix this. Ethan stepped back into the office, keeping the conversation calm and short. At 7:31, the tow truck turned into the lot with amber lights blinking softly in the morning haze. The driver parked behind the Porsche, stepped out with a tablet, and began photographing the sign, the lines, the garage bay, and the license plate. Tyler suddenly stopped talking and started pacing near the sidewalk. Then Brenda's white sport utility vehicle came sharply around the corner from the Brookhaven Pines entrance. She stepped out in a pale blazer, already holding her phone up, already looking prepared to perform outrage for an audience. Ethan stayed under his own camera, with his hands visible and his voice level. Brenda demanded to know who authorized this. Ethan pointed toward the printed documents through the office window and answered, the property manager, the lease, the posted sign, the final notice, and the 12 mornings your son ignored all of them. Brenda Whitmore looked at the tow driver first, then at Ethan, then at the security camera above the garage door, as if she was calculating which version of the morning would be easiest to control. This vehicle belongs to my son, she said, loud enough for 2 early gym members crossing the clubhouse path to hear. Ethan kept his voice even. I know who it belongs to. That is why the final notice was sent to you yesterday. Brenda stepped closer to the office door, still holding her phone in one hand. You cannot punish a resident family because you refuse to be neighborly. Ethan did not answer that directly. He had learned that Brenda liked emotional words because they sounded better than facts. Instead, he opened the folder on the counter and turned the first page toward the window, the lease section assigning the space to Walker Precision Repair. The tow driver continued working with calm routine, photographing the Porsche from each side and entering notes into his tablet. Tyler stood near the front bumper, looking back and forth between his mother and the tow truck like he expected one of them to make the problem disappear. Mom, he said, tell him this is not legal. Brenda lifted her chin and told the driver that she was a homeowners association board member. The driver did not look impressed. Ma'am, he said, I am here under private property authorization. If you believe there is a dispute, the release information will be on the tow receipt. That answer seemed to irritate Brenda more than anything Ethan had said. She turned back toward him and said, You are making a serious mistake. Ethan pointed to the parking sign. The serious mistake was repeated every morning after written warning. Tyler finally spoke up, his voice sharper now. It is a parking spot. Nobody got hurt. Ethan looked past him at Mr. Alvarez's pickup waiting behind the parts room, then at the blocked garage bay, then at the delivery schedule taped inside the office window. It cost time, customers, delivery access, and money. That is why businesses put rules in writing. Brenda tried one more angle. She said Brookhaven Pines had a long-standing relationship with nearby businesses, and Ethan was damaging that relationship by creating a scene. Ethan almost responded, but the tow driver finished securing the Porsche and handed Tyler a printed notice with the towing company name, storage address, phone number, and release procedure. The scene Brenda wanted had already happened, but not the way she intended. There was no shouting from Ethan, no angry gesture, no careless mistake she could later repeat in a board meeting. There was only a posted sign, a blocked garage, a licensed tow truck, and a file thick enough to make her story uncomfortable. As the Porsche was pulled slowly from the reserved space, Tyler followed it for a few steps, then stopped when he realized the driver was not waiting for permission from his mother. Brenda immediately began typing on her phone. Ethan could guess what she was writing before Dana Miller forwarded it to him 15 minutes later. Brenda had sent a message to the Brookhaven Pines board claiming that a local business owner had targeted her family, embarrassed her son, and used aggressive towing tactics over a minor misunderstanding. Ethan read the message from his office chair while the reserved space sat empty for the first time that morning. He did not feel victory. He felt preparation, because Brenda had just done what he expected her to do. She had moved the argument from the parking lot to the homeowners association, where she believed her titles still meant more than his evidence. By noon, Brenda Whitmore had already turned one towed vehicle into a neighborhood emergency. Her message moved through Brookhaven Pines faster than the morning trash trucks, dressed in careful words like concern, respect, and community values. She claimed Ethan Walker had humiliated her son in front of residents, treated a simple parking misunderstanding like a criminal matter, and used a tow truck to bully a young man whose only mistake was parking near the clubhouse before business hours. Ethan read the forwarded message twice, not because it surprised him, but because he wanted to understand exactly which parts she had left out. There was no mention of the reserved sign, no mention of the final notice, no mention of the 12 prior mornings, no mention of the blocked garage bay, the customer delays, or the fact that Tyler had parked closer to Ethan's door even after being warned in writing. Brenda had not written a report. She had written a performance. At 12:34, Dana Miller called Ethan and told him the Brookhaven Pines board had requested an evening meeting at the clubhouse because Brenda was pushing the issue as a dispute between the association and a neighboring business. Dana sounded careful, almost apologetic. She said the commercial property management company would attend if Ethan wanted support, but Ethan already knew he needed to be there himself. If Brenda was going to tell the story in a room full of residents, Ethan was going to bring the parts of the story she had edited out. He closed the shop office door, sat at his computer, and began arranging the Whitmore parking record in order. First came the lease page showing the reserved space assigned to Walker Precision Repair. Then the property map. Then the photographs of the sign, the yellow parking lines, and the garage bay. Then the emails. The first polite warning, Brenda's reply about reasonable flexibility, Ethan's clarification that the space was not a community amenity, the final notice, and Dana's written towing authorization. After that came the time-stamped camera clips. Ethan chose only the clearest ones. Tyler arriving on the fourth morning. Tyler reading the note and putting it in his pocket. Tyler parking after the final notice. The dashboard note that said talk to mom. The tow driver documenting the Porsche before removal. Ethan made sure every file name included the date and camera angle. He printed a simple timeline, not dramatic, not emotional, just one line for each morning the Porsche appeared in the space. At 3:10, Mr. Alvarez stopped by to pick up his truck and asked if everything was all right. Ethan said the parking matter had moved to a meeting. Mr. Alvarez shook his head and said he was willing to confirm he had been delayed that morning if anyone needed to hear it. Ethan thanked him and wrote down the offer, but did not push. He did not want the meeting to become a popularity contest. Brenda already had that style covered. By 5:40, Ethan placed the documents in a black folder, copied the video files onto a small drive, and sent Dana the full digital packet. Then he locked the shop, looked at the empty reserved space, and drove the short distance to the Brookhaven Pines clubhouse. Through the windows, he could already see residents gathering around the long meeting table, whispering in small groups. Brenda stood near the front in her pale blazer, Tyler beside her, both looking like they expected the room to belong to them. Ethan walked in quietly with the folder under one arm and the calm expression of a man who had not come to argue. He had come to press play. The clubhouse room was already arranged like Brenda Whitmore expected a hearing and a victory at the same time. Board members sat along the front table, residents filled the folding chairs, and Tyler sat beside his mother with the tense confidence of someone who believed the outcome had been decided before the facts arrived. Brenda opened the meeting by standing before anyone asked her to. She spoke smoothly, thanking everyone for taking the situation seriously, then described Ethan Walker as a nearby business owner who had shown poor judgment, poor neighborly conduct, and unnecessary hostility toward a Brookhaven Pines family. She said Tyler had parked near the clubhouse for a short morning workout, that Ethan had overreacted, and that a private tow truck had been used to embarrass her son over what she called a minor misunderstanding. Ethan sat quietly while she spoke. He did not interrupt when Brenda said residents should not have to fear local businesses. He did not react. When Tyler looked around the room as if expecting sympathy, he only waited for Brenda to finish, because the longer she talked, the more clearly she built a version of events that the evidence could test. When the board chair, Carolyn Reeves, finally turned to Ethan and asked if he wanted to respond, he stood with the black folder in one hand and the small drive in the other. He did not begin with an accusation. He began with the property map. He placed printed copies in front of Carolyn, Dana Miller, and the management representative, then explained that Walker Precision Repair sat on a separate commercial parcel outside the Brookhaven Pines Association boundary. The reserved parking space was assigned in his lease, marked on the map, painted on the pavement, and posted with a sign directly in front of the garage bay. Brenda shifted in her chair, but said nothing. Ethan continued with the timeline. He showed the first photograph of Tyler's Porsche in the space, then the second, then the third. Each image included the same sign, the same yellow lines, and the same blocked garage door. A resident in the second row leaned forward. Someone whispered, "That is not near the clubhouse. That is in front of his shop." Ethan then read the final notice aloud, slowly and plainly, including the line that said the vehicle would be removed at the owner's expense if it returned. Brenda tried to speak, but Carolyn raised one hand and told Ethan to continue. That was when he connected his laptop to the clubhouse screen. The first video showed Tyler arriving early in the morning, parking under the sign, and walking toward the clubhouse. The next showed Tyler removing Ethan's note from the windshield. The next showed the Porsche returning after Brenda had been emailed. Then Ethan played the clip from Thursday morning, the one after final notice. The Porsche turned into the space, stopped in front of the roll-up door, and sat there while the clubhouse parking lot across the way showed several open spaces. The room went still. Ethan paused the video on the clearest frame, Tyler stepping out of the car with the reserved for tenant sign visible a few feet behind him. Carolyn looked at Brenda and asked one simple question. "Did your son have written permission to use that space?" Brenda answered that there had been an understanding between the community and nearby businesses. Dana Miller immediately said there was no such agreement with her company. Ethan opened the folder again and placed Dana's towing authorization email on the table. The management representative read it, nodded once, and said the tow appeared to follow the commercial property procedure. Brenda's face tightened, but her voice stayed controlled. She said the issue was not technical parking law, but how Ethan chose to treat a neighbor. Ethan looked at the residents, then at the screen, then back at Brenda. "I treated it like a business access problem after 12 warnings. The camera just made it impossible to call it a misunderstanding." For the first time that evening, Brenda Whitmore did not have the room leaning toward her. The residents were not angry at Ethan anymore. They were looking at the screen, at the frozen image of Tyler standing beside the Porsche with the reserved sign clearly behind him, and then back at Brenda, waiting for an explanation that sounded better than the one she had already given. Tyler shifted in his chair and muttered that the sign was not that serious, but the comment landed badly. Carolyn Reeves asked him to repeat it, and he suddenly decided not to. Ethan closed the video window and opened the simple timeline he had prepared. He did not add emotion to it. He read the dates, the arrival times, the customer delays, the email warnings, and the final notice. Dana Miller confirmed each property document when asked. The management representative confirmed there was no written agreement allowing Brookhaven Pines residents or board members to use tenant spaces at the commercial strip. Then Mr. Alvarez, who had quietly arrived halfway through the meeting, raised his hand and said his appointment had been delayed that morning because the Porsche was blocking the bay. He did not exaggerate. He did not attack Tyler. He simply told the board that Ethan had apologized, moved things around, and handled the situation professionally. That one calm statement hurt Brenda more than any argument could have, because it turned the issue back into what it had always been, a business trying to operate while someone else treated its access like personal convenience. Brenda tried to recover by saying she would pay a reasonable fee directly to Ethan if he would call the towing company and have the Porsche released immediately. Ethan shook his head. The vehicle is no longer on my property. The release process belongs to the towing company now. Tyler leaned forward and asked how much it would cost. Ethan did not know the final amount, and he refused to guess. Dana gave him the number from the receipt and told him storage fees usually began the same day and increased daily until the owner completed release. Tyler looked at Brenda, expecting her to handle it. Brenda looked at Carolyn, expecting the board to pressure Ethan. Carolyn looked at the documents and made the only choice left that would protect the association. She stated for the record that Brookhaven Pines would not represent Tyler's parking as official association business, would not reimburse towing or storage fees, and would not issue any complaint against Walker Precision Repair based on the evidence presented. The room reacted quietly, but the shift was obvious. Brenda's shoulders stiffened. Tyler's face lost its confident edge. Ethan gathered his papers while Brenda insisted the board was abandoning a resident family. Carolyn answered that the board was refusing to turn a personal parking violation into an association dispute. That sentence ended the meeting more effectively than a vote. Outside, under the clubhouse lights, Tyler called the towing company on speakerphone. The release quote made him curse under his breath. Then Brenda took the phone and argued about authority, fairness, and community relationships until the employee repeated the same answer 3 times. Payment, proof of ownership, and valid identification were required for release. Brenda ended the call without paying. Tyler asked what they were going to do. Brenda said they would fight it on principle. Ethan heard that from several feet away while walking to his truck, and for the first time all day, he felt something colder than frustration. He felt certainty. The Porsche was safe, documented, and waiting in a licensed storage yard. But every day Brenda called principal was going to cost Tyler real money. For the next several days, Ethan Walker heard nothing from Brenda Whitmore directly, but he heard enough through the neighborhood to know she was still trying to turn stubbornness into a strategy. Tyler did not retrieve the Porsche on Friday. He did not retrieve it on Saturday. By Monday morning, the towing company had added storage fees, administrative fees, and certified notice costs to the release balance. Ethan learned this only because Dana Miller forwarded him a copy of the official notice sent to the registered owner, confirming that the vehicle remained in storage and that release required payment, proof of ownership, and valid identification. Ethan saved the notice in the Whitmore parking record and went back to work. That was the part Brenda never understood. Ethan did not need to chase her. He did not need to embarrass Tyler again. The process she had dared him to start was now moving without his help. A week later, Carolyn Reeves sent a formal message to Brookhaven Pines residents clarifying that tenant parking at the neighboring commercial strip was private property, not overflow parking, not clubhouse access, and not subject to homeowners association permission. The message did not mention Brenda by name, but everyone knew why it had been written. It also stated that board members and their family members had no authority to use private business spaces or imply community privilege outside association boundaries. Brenda called the statement unnecessary. Tyler called it dramatic. But neither of them paid the towing company. Instead, they disputed, delayed, and insisted someone would eventually reduce the fees because the car was too valuable for anyone to let the matter go that far. That belief lasted until the certified lien notice arrived. By then, the balance had grown far beyond the original tow. The towing company followed state procedure, mailed the required notices, waited the required time, and documented every unanswered deadline. Ethan was not part of those decisions. The Porsche had left his property intact, and from that point forward, Tyler's problem was no longer with Walker Precision Repair. It was with paperwork, storage rates, and a clock that did not care who his mother was. 3 weeks after the tow, Ethan saw the Porsche one last time, not in front of his shop, but behind the chain-link fence of the towing yard while he was dropping off paperwork nearby for a customer. The car was still recognizable, but the shine no longer looked powerful. It looked trapped under dust, notice tags, and bad decisions. Later, Dana told him the vehicle had gone through the lien process and was sold as part of a salvage lot because the accumulated costs, title complications, and condition review made recovery impractical for the owner. Ethan did not celebrate. He simply understood the ending. The Porsche had not been damaged by anger. It had been lowered, day by day, by every warning Tyler ignored and every payment Brenda refused on principle. Back at the shop, Ethan installed one new sign under the old reserved parking notice. It read, "Reserved means reserved." Customers laughed when they saw it, but they also stopped asking why the sign was there. Brookhaven Pines became quieter after that. Brenda stopped walking into neighboring businesses like they were extensions of her boardroom. Tyler started parking in the clubhouse lot like everyone else, though for a while he arrived in a borrowed sedan and kept his head down. Ethan's mornings returned to normal. Garage door up, coffee on the counter, customer keys lined in order, and his reserved space opened before sunrise. He never turned that Porsche into scrap metal with his hands. He only stopped saving it from the consequences parked underneath it.